They did not just cheat on you. They chose someone else while making you feel crazy for even needing them. Drop the word avoidant in the comments right now if this is hitting close to home. And subscribe, because what I am about to tell you is the one thing nobody else is going to say out loud. All right, here we go. You were not paranoid. You were not needy. You were not too much. You were in a relationship with someone who made you feel like asking for basic human connection was some kind of personal failure on your part. And then on top of all of that, after all the times you shrunk yourself down, after all the times you told yourself, maybe I am the problem, after all the times you convinced yourself that if you could just be a little less emotional, a little more patient, a little more understanding, they went and they cheated. And now you are sitting here wondering, what is wrong with you? And that is the part that I need to address first before anything else. Because that question, that one question, what is wrong with me, is the most dangerous place your mind can go right now, and I need to pull you out of it immediately. Nothing is wrong with you. Let me say that again, because I know you half heard it the first time. Nothing is wrong with you. What happened to you is not a reflection of your worth. It is not evidence that you are unlovable. It is not proof that you were too needy or too sensitive or too demanding. What it is information. Painful, gut-wrenching, devastating information, but information nonetheless. And the sooner you start treating it like information instead of a verdict on your value as a human being, the sooner you are going to be able to do the one thing I am going to tell you about in just a moment. But first, I need you to understand something about the person who did this to you. Because if you do not understand who you are actually dealing with, you are going to keep asking the wrong questions. And wrong questions lead to wrong conclusions. And wrong conclusions lead to decisions that keep you stuck in pain for years longer than you need to be. So let us talk about avoidant people. Not in some clinical, detached textbook way. Let us talk about them in real, human, painfully recognizable terms. Because if you have been in this kind of relationship, you know exactly what I am describing. You know the push and pull. You know the moments where they were warm and present and you thought, finally, this is it. This is who they really are. And then the next day they were distant and cold and somehow you were the one apologizing. You know that feeling. You know what it is like to need reassurance and feel like asking for it was the worst thing you could have done. You know what it is like to have your emotional needs treated like an inconvenience, like you are asking for too much just by being a person with feelings. Avoidant people have a very specific relationship with intimacy. They want connection on some level, everyone does. That is a human need, but they are terrified of it at the same time. And that terror does not show up as obvious fear. It shows up as distance. It shows up as dismissiveness. It shows up as making you feel like your needs are excessive when they are completely normal. It shows up as them pulling away right when things start to feel real and close and meaningful. And if you were with someone like this, you learned over time to need less. You learned to ask for less. You learned to make yourself smaller so that they would not feel crowded. You trained yourself out of your own natural emotional responses because the alternative was watching them shut down entirely. And that is an exhausting way to live. That is a quietly soul-destroying way to exist in a relationship. And it creates a very specific kind of person, not a weak person, not a damaged person, but a person who has gotten so used to managing their own needs alone that they start to lose track of what they were even entitled to want in the first place. So when an avoidant cheats, here is what makes it particularly brutal. It is not just the betrayal of the infidelity itself. It is the layers underneath it. Because you were not just cheated on. You were cheated on by someone who made you feel like your emotional needs were too much, which means somewhere in your brain right now, there is a voice whispering, maybe I drove them to this. Maybe if I had been less anxious, less clingy, less whatever label they put on me, maybe they would not have gone looking elsewhere. And I need you to hear me very clearly when I say that voice is lying to you. That voice is not truth. That voice is the residue of being in a relationship with someone who consistently made you feel responsible for their emotional withdrawals. That voice is what happens when you spend months or years being trained to believe that your needs are the problem. But let us be honest with each other right now. Let us be really honest. Someone who cheats does not cheat because their partner was too emotionally present. Someone who cheats makes a choice, a deliberate, conscious, in-the-moment choice to do something they know will cause harm. And no matter how avoidant they are, no matter how much distance they needed, no matter how uncomfortable intimacy made them feel, they had other options. They could have talked to you. They could have asked for space. They could have been honest about what they were feeling. They could have chosen to leave the relationship before pursuing someone else. They did not do any of those things. They made a different choice. And that choice belongs to them entirely. Now, here is where I want to get into the one thing. The one simple thing you need to do right now, and I promise you it is simple. It is not easy. Simple and easy are not the same thing. But it is clear, it is specific, and it is the thing that is going to determine whether you come out of this stronger or whether you spend the next few years repeating this same painful dynamic with a different person wearing the same emotional unavailability in a slightly different costume. The one thing is this: you need to stop trying to understand them and start understanding yourself. Read that again. Stop trying to understand them and start understanding yourself. Because right now, I know exactly what is happening in your head. You are replaying conversations. You are analyzing their behavior. You are trying to figure out why they did it. You are looking for the logic in something that probably does not have clean logic. You are wondering if they actually loved you. You are wondering if any of it was real. You are wondering what was going on in their head when they made that choice. You are trying to understand the avoidant. And I get it. I completely understand why that is where your mind goes. Because if you can understand it, maybe you can make sense of it. And if you can make sense of it, maybe the pain has some kind of structure to it. Maybe it becomes bearable. But here is the problem with that. You can spend a year trying to understand them and come up with 100 different theories about their attachment style and their childhood wounds and their emotional unavailability and still be no closer to peace. Because understanding them does not actually give you what you need. What you need is to understand yourself. And specifically, you need to understand one very important thing about yourself: why you stayed. Not in a judgmental way, not in a you should have known better way, in a genuinely curious, compassionate, open way. Why did you stay? What was the pull? What kept you there when the signs were showing you something that did not feel right? What story were you telling yourself about what the relationship was or what it could become? What were you hoping for? What need were you trying to get met? Because the answers to those questions are not about blame. They are about pattern recognition. And pattern recognition is the only thing that is going to stop you from walking into this same situation with a different person 3 years from now and feeling this exact same devastation all over again. Here is something that a lot of people do not want to hear, but that I think is genuinely important. People who are naturally anxious in attachment, people who tend toward anxiety when their partner pulls away, people who feel that desperate, uncomfortable need for reassurance when things get uncertain, those people are very specifically, very strongly drawn to avoidant partners. Not because they are masochists, not because they secretly want to be hurt, but because the emotional landscape of an avoidant relationship feels familiar. The uncertainty feels like excitement. The moments of warmth feel more meaningful because they are rare. The hot and cold dynamic creates an emotional roller coaster that mimics the feeling of intense connection, even when what it actually is anxiety being constantly triggered and then occasionally relieved. And if that is you, if you recognize yourself in that description, then this is not just about this relationship. This is about a pattern that started long before this person came into your life. This is about what you learned to normalize, what you learned to expect, what you learned to call love. And I want to be clear, this is not your fault. The patterns we carry into adult relationships are almost always formed before we had any say in the matter. They were formed in childhood, in the dynamics between us and our caregivers, in the lessons our nervous systems learned about what love feels like, what safety feels like, what connection looks and sounds and behaves like. If you grew up in an environment where love was inconsistent, where warmth was sometimes there and sometimes not, where you had to earn attention or manage someone else's emotional state to feel safe, then inconsistency in a partner does not feel wrong to you. It feels like home. And home, even when it is painful, has a pull to it that is almost impossible to explain to someone who has not experienced it. So when I say start understanding yourself, I mean start getting curious about that. Start asking yourself, where did I learn this? What am I actually looking for when I choose a partner like this? What am I trying to resolve? What old story am I trying to rewrite? Because those questions answered honestly are the beginning of something genuinely transformational. They are the beginning of you actually changing the pattern instead of just changing the person you are playing it out with. Now let us talk about what understanding yourself actually looks like in practice. Because I do not want this to be abstract. I do not want you to walk away from this with some vague idea that you need to do some soul searching. I want you to have something concrete, something you can actually do, something that moves you forward. The first thing is grief. Real, full, unfiltered grief. Not the kind where you cry for a few days and then tell yourself you should be over it. Not the kind where you distract yourself with work or friends or dating apps. Real grief. The kind where you sit with the loss of what this was and what you thought it could be. Because here is what a lot of people do not realize about avoidant relationships. A huge part of what you are grieving is not just the person. It is the potential. It is the version of this relationship that you believed in. The version where they finally became who you needed them to be. The version where the distance collapsed and the warmth was consistent and you finally felt fully seen and loved by the person whose seeing and love felt like the most important thing in the world. That potential is a powerful thing to grieve, and it deserves to be grieved properly. Not dismissed, not bypassed, sat with, felt fully. Because if you skip the grief, it does not go away. It just goes underground. And underground grief has a way of running your choices from below the surface without you even realizing it. The second thing is getting honest about what you accepted. And this one is uncomfortable, but it is necessary. During the relationship, what did you accept that you should not have? What did you excuse? What did you rationalize? What did you tell yourself was okay when some part of you knew it was not? Not because you were weak, but because you cared, because you were invested, because leaving felt harder than staying. I am asking you to make that list. Not to torture yourself with it, not to use it as evidence of your own failure, but to see clearly. Because clarity is protective. Clarity is the thing that helps you recognize the same patterns earlier next time. Clarity is what makes the difference between walking into the same situation again and walking into something genuinely different. The third thing, and this is the one that most people resist the hardest, is taking your attention off of them completely. I know how hard that is. I know that when someone has hurt you this badly, Your mind wants to stay focused on them. It wants to know what they are doing. It wants to know if they are with the person they cheated with. It wants to know if they feel any remorse. It wants to know if they are thinking about you. It wants to check. It wants to analyze. It wants to keep a window open to that situation. But every single second you spend focused on them is a second you are not spending focused on you. And you are the only person in this equation that you have any real power over. You cannot make them feel remorse. You cannot make them suddenly develop the emotional capacity they have been missing. You cannot rewrite what happened by understanding it from enough angles. But you can redirect that enormous amount of mental and emotional energy toward yourself, toward your own healing, toward your own growth, toward understanding your own patterns so deeply that you become someone who would not tolerate this situation long enough to be cheated on in it. That last part is important. I want to say it again. The goal is not just to survive this. The goal is to become someone who would not tolerate this situation long enough to be cheated on in it. Because the version of you who comes out of this, if you do the work, is not the same person who walked into it. And that is not sad. That is actually one of the most hopeful things I can say to you right now. The person you are going to become through this, if you choose to use this as a turning point and not just a trauma, is someone with much clearer radar. Someone who knows what they will and will not accept before a relationship starts demanding they make that decision. Someone who recognizes emotional unavailability early and does not romanticize it. Someone who knows the difference between chemistry and compatibility. Someone who knows that the intensity of the pursuit does not equal the depth of the love. Because let us be honest about something. When you are in that anxious, avoidant dynamic, the chemistry feels enormous. It feels like the strongest thing you have ever felt. And part of the reason it feels so strong is precisely because of the uncertainty. Because your nervous system is constantly in a state of low-level threat assessment. Is this person going to be warm today or cold? Are they going to show up for me or pull away? Am I safe or am I about to be abandoned? And when the threat occasionally disappears, when they do show up, when they are warm, when they choose you in that moment, the relief your body feels is so enormous that it gets labeled as connection, as love, as this is the one. When really what it is the relief of a nervous system that was under chronic stress finally getting a moment to exhale. And that is not love, that is survival. And you deserve actual love. You deserve the kind of relationship where your baseline is calm, where you do not spend most of your time trying to decode someone's behavior, where you do not have to earn warmth, where showing up as your full self does not send your partner running, where your needs are not treated as an inconvenience, but as a completely natural and welcome part of intimacy. That kind of relationship exists. I want you to know that. It is not a fantasy. It is not something that only other people get to have. But you will not find it, or more accurately, you will not be able to recognize it and receive it until you have done the work of understanding why the other kind felt so magnetic. Now I want to address something that is probably going through your mind right now, because I know how these situations go. I know what the mind does in the days and weeks after a betrayal like this. And one of the things it does, especially with an avoidant, is start bargaining. Start creating scenarios where maybe things could be different. Maybe they are remorseful enough now that they will finally change. Maybe the cheating was the rock bottom they needed to actually commit to the relationship. Maybe now that everything is out in the open, maybe now there is a chance for something real. And I am not going to tell you that people never change, because they do. Growth is real. Change is real. But I am going to tell you something that I need you to hear very carefully. Their capacity to change is not your responsibility. And more importantly, your willingness to stay and wait while they figure out whether they are going to change should not come at the cost of your own healing and your own self-respect. Here is the hard truth. Avoidant people who cheat are not cheating because they have too much capacity for connection. They are cheating because they have a specific relationship with intimacy that they have not done the work to address. And that work, if they ever do it, needs to happen independently of you. It cannot happen with you as the safety net. It cannot happen with you as the constant presence who keeps them from having to face the real consequences of their behavior. If they are going to change, they are going to need to do it the hard way. And that is not a journey you can take with them. Not now, not after this. Your job right now is not to manage their growth. Your job is to manage your own. Your job is to take this devastating, painful, disorienting thing that happened to you and refuse to let it make you smaller. Refuse to let it confirm the lie that you are not enough. Refuse to let it send you into the next relationship carrying this wound unexamined. Let me tell you what the people who come out of this kind of experience looking and feeling genuinely different have in common. It is not that they found someone new quickly. It is not that they got revenge. It is not that they convinced themselves they were fine when they were not. What they have in common is that they got honest. They got honest with themselves about the relationship they were in. They got honest about what they accepted and why. They got honest about the patterns they brought to it. And they did the actual work, sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes slow, sometimes 2 steps forward and 1 step back, to understand those patterns deeply enough that they stopped feeling inevitable. Because that is what the pattern feels like when you are in it. Inevitable. Like this is just how relationships go for you. Like maybe you are just the kind of person who ends up in this kind of situation. Like maybe your picker is just broken, but your picker is not broken. Your picker is calibrated, and calibration can be recalibrated. That is actually good news, even though I know it does not feel like good news right now. You did not choose this person because you are broken. You chose this person because something about them matched a pattern you already had running inside you. And you can change that pattern. Not by finding someone new and hoping it goes differently. Not by swearing off relationships entirely. Not by building walls so high that nothing can get in. But by actually understanding the pattern. By getting underneath it. By asking the real questions. Why did this feel like love? What did I believe about myself that made this feel like what I deserved? What was I hoping to prove? What was I trying to finally get that I needed once and never received? Those questions are not easy. Some of them might bring up things you have not thought about in years. Some of them might require the help of a good therapist or a coach or someone who can hold space for you while you work through it. And if that is what it takes, then that is what it takes. Because you are worth that investment. You are worth the time. You are worth the effort. You are worth doing this properly instead of just getting through it and hoping the next situation is different. I want to leave you with something. Because I know that the place you are in right now is one of the most disorienting places a person can be. You trusted someone. You opened yourself up. You stayed even when part of you was telling you something did not feel right. And then the worst happened. And now everything feels uncertain. The future feels uncertain. Your judgment feels uncertain. Your understanding of what love is supposed to feel like feels uncertain. But here is what I want you to hold on to. That uncertainty, as painful as it is actually a gift. Because certainty was what you had before. Certainty that this person was worth staying for. Certainty that if you could just be a little more, a little less, a little different, it would work out. Certainty that maybe you were the problem. And all of that certainty was wrong. The uncertainty you feel right now is the beginning of something more honest. It is the beginning of you no longer accepting a story that was never actually true. And from that place, from that honest, uncertain, open place, you can build something real. Not just a better relationship, a better understanding of yourself, a clearer sense of what you need, a stronger connection to your own worth that does not depend on whether someone else shows up consistently enough to confirm it. You are not starting over. You are starting from a place of much more information than you had before. And information, as I said at the very beginning, is power, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. So take a breath, give yourself permission to feel all of this. And then, when you are ready, do the one simple thing. Stop trying to understand them. Start understanding yourself. That is where everything changes.